Consumers expect that HSUS is going to be a voice for all animals, not just dogs, cats, and wildlife. In fact, consumers name HSUS the most credible source of information when it comes to farm animal care, according to the Center for Food Integrity's research on the topic. So our members and the general public expect us to be providing this voice for the chickens, the turkeys, the pigs, the cattle, and the dogs and the cats, the elephants, the whales, and more. In the United States, one of the things, as Lisa mentioned, that we have been working on has been to try to provide some semblance of legal protection from cruelty for animals who are raised for food. Now, to Americans, this concept is not necessarily a radical one. We know that already Americans think that animals deserve legal protection. We have anti-cruelty laws in all 50 states codifying this notion that there are some things that we can do to animals that people think are so heinous that they ought to be punished with criminal penalties. We've got laws against cockfighting in all 50 states. People think that taking 2 chickens and putting them in a ring and allowing them to fight is so bad it ought to be illegal in all 50 states. In fact, it's a felony in all 50 states to engage in dog fighting. But what if those chickens aren't being used for fighting purposes, but for food purposes? Or what if it's not dogs, but instead it's pigs? Let's look at where Americans stand on these issues. Technomic, a food industry consulting service, did a study where they looked at the most important social issues to restaurant patrons. And what did they find? That number 3 on that list was animal welfare. Higher than the environment, higher than fair trade, higher than local, higher than organic. Clearly, Americans who are concerned about these types of social issues are really concerned about animal welfare. And it's not just people like Technomic and CFI who are finding that this is an important issue. If you look at the American Farm Bureau Federation's own polling on this, a national survey done through Oklahoma State, those of you who aren't familiar with it, Oklahoma State isn't exactly a bastion of animal rights radicalism. What they found is that 81% of Americans think that farm animals have roughly the same ability to feel pain and discomfort, not just as dogs and cats, but as human beings. 95% say they are concerned about the treatment of animals on farms. 68% think the government should take an active role in promoting farm animal welfare. 75% would vote for a law requiring farmers to treat their animals better, but only 18%, less than a fifth of Americans, say that housing sows in gestation crates is humane. So let's look at that map of what it looks like for farm animals. Then we don't have a single federal law that relates to the treatment of animals while they're on farms. We have some laws that relate to the transport and slaughter of some animals, but even then, that's still 1% of these animals' lives. For 99% of their lives while they're on the farm, we don't have a single federal law whatsoever. All of the state cruelty codes could apply to farm animals, but most of them exempt customary agricultural practices, regardless of whether those practices cause pain and suffering to animals or not. And the result of this is that oftentimes farm animals have very little legal protection when it comes to preventing the types of cruelty that sometimes can occur. Now, one response that you'll see from the industry often on this is, well, we don't need laws because farmers already have an economic incentive to treat animals well. We take care of them and they take care of us. The farmer who mistreats an animal is the farmer who goes out of business. How often have you guys heard this type of argument? The problem is that no credible scientist in this field thinks that that's actually true. Oftentimes, productivity can be an indicator of good welfare, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the animals are being well treated if they're laying eggs or if they're giving milk or if they're producing flesh. So for example, Joy mentioned UC Davis says that individual animals may be in a comparatively poor state of welfare even though productivity within the unit may be high. Dr. Don Broom at Cambridge says that efforts to achieve faster growth, efficient production, increased prolificacy are some of the causes of the worst animal welfare problems. In other words, sometimes hyperproductivity or being too productive can actually cause animal welfare problems. Additionally, Dr. Frank Gary, a dairy vet at Colorado State, says that cows on diets that promote extremely high production are at increased risk from GI ailments. So here are examples of where increased productivity can sometimes actually be a cause of poor welfare. It doesn't mean that good productivity is bad for welfare. It just means that we can't simply assert that if animals are producing, then we know that they are being well treated.